going to look at common mistakes and solutions to those mistakes. So in this module, we're going to look at the main reasons why students don't get the score they need, and we're going to look at easy solutions to these common problems. So in the last module, that was a very, very important module. We looked at the overall strategy and the overall structure. We're going to be talking a lot about these two things in this module. So if you didn't look at that module, please go back and take a look. Okay, so we're going to look at 10 common problems. These are problems that I see every single day when I'm marking people's essays, and they are specific to general training task 1. So 10 common problems, and then we're going to look at very easy solutions to these common problems. So the first common problem is not having a clear purpose. As I said in the previous module, it is very, very important that you tell the reader what the main reason for you writing to them is. So why are you writing to them? If you don't do that, it's very confusing to read it. The other thing people do is they start with the bullet points. So instead of telling the reader, telling the examiner what the letter is about, they just immediately start talking about the bullet points, and that is extremely confusing and difficult to read. So the solution to this problem is your very first paragraph should clearly state your main reason for writing the letter. So it's dear whoever, dear sir, madam, or dear your friend, and then immediately after dear, you write the main reason for writing the letter. And this will be clear from the question. The question will always clearly state why you are writing the letter. So you just take that from the question and put that in your first paragraph. And you can use keywords from the question, or even better, use synonyms to make it very clear to the examiner. So look at the keywords from the question that tell you the reason why you're writing, and then you can just take them, or if you can think of synonyms, use them, and this will tell the examiner exactly what you're writing about. Common problem number 2, not covering all the bullet points. Now, this is one of the most common problems. Students will write about 1 bullet point or 2 bullet points, but they don't write about the 3 bullet points. If you don't write about all 3 and you don't write your purpose, you haven't answered the question, and this will really, really lower your score. And they also fail to mention just 1 of the bullet points. So most of the time students write about 2, and they might briefly discuss 1 of the 3rd bullet point, but it's not really enough. So the solution to this problem is simply planning. You plan as I taught you in module 4, and if you plan in that way, you will always cover the bullet points. The second solution to that is use the question to plan your answer. So when you're planning, as I taught you in module 4, you use the question and you write your ideas beside the bullet points, and that will ensure that you will always cover each of the bullet points. And the final thing you should do is use the strategy and structure from the last module. So in module 5, I taught you the structure that you should use. If you plan properly and if you use that structure, 100% of the time you will cover all of the bullet points, and this common problem won't be an issue for you. Third problem is poor paragraphing. You wouldn't believe the amount of essays that I get, and it just looks like one big block of writing. There are no spaces, no indents, and it's impossible to tell where one paragraph finishes and where the next paragraph starts. And the solution to this problem is to use the structure that I taught you in the previous module, and just very simple, skip a line. Skip 1 line, skip 2 lines in between the paragraphs. This will tell the examiner clearly where one paragraph finishes and when one paragraph starts, and it will also allow you to edit your writing much more easily. If you have space between each paragraph and you need to go back and you need to change something or you need to add something, you have the space to do it. A nightmare is if you have no space but you need to change a lot of things, and then it just creates a real mess, and it's very difficult for you and difficult for the examiner. Common problem number 4 is not using the correct tone and not having a consistent tone. So lots of students will maybe have, say it's an informal letter, they might have informal in paragraph 1 and then formal in paragraph 2 and then informal in paragraph 3. If it's an informal letter, you must have a consistent tone throughout the whole letter. It must be informal throughout the whole letter. If it's formal, then you can't have any informal in your letter. So the solution to this is decide on your tone during the planning stage. So when you're planning, as I taught you before, make sure you decide if it is an informal or a formal letter before you start planning. And also check your work at the end to make sure your tone is consistent. Now, in modules 8 and modules 10, I'm going to show you the language that you should use in order to make sure your letter is formal or informal. So just during the checking stage at the end, after you finished your letter, just make sure that everything is consistent. A common problem number 5 is main points are not clear. So it's not clear to the examiner which of your paragraphs relate to which of the bullet points. So it's not very clear by reading the paragraphs what you're really talking about, and this lowers the coherence, and it can also lower the task achievement because the examiner is not sure whether you have answered the question or not. So the solution to this is use the structure that I taught you in the previous module and use keywords from the question or synonyms to make it very clear to the examiner which bullet point you're talking about. So if you use the structure is purpose, bullet point 1, bullet point 2, bullet point 3, and you use keywords or synonyms from those bullet points or from the purpose, then it will be extremely clear to the examiner what you're talking about, and they'll be able to give you the high marks. If it is not clear, then they won't be able to give you those high marks. Common problem number 6 is undeveloped main points. This is a huge one. This is probably the main reason why students don't get the band 8, the band 9. So these students have done everything correct and the structure is good and it is very clear which points they're talking about, but their answers are just too short. They haven't really developed them properly. So the solution to this is to write around approximately 50 words for each bullet point. So you don't have to write 50 words for the purpose, but the 3 bullet point paragraphs, try and write around 50 words. Common problem number 7 is incorrect tenses. Now, some of the questions are designed to test your ability to use different tenses. So they will ask you to talk about the past, they will ask you to talk about the present, and they might actually ask you to talk about the future as well. So they're testing your ability to use the correct tenses. So the solution to this is to think about the time periods you will have to use during the planning stage. So look at the bullet points and think, what time period am I talking about here? Am I talking about the past, present, or the future? And you can just mark down past, present, or future beside those bullet points and think about it during the planning stage, and that will ensure that you use the correct tenses when you're writing. And also make checking tenses part of your proofreading at the end. So during the planning stage, note down which tense you're using, and then during the proofreading at the end, when you've finished and you're checking everything, just make sure that the verbs are the keywords that will show that you've used the tenses correctly. Just check those verbs to make sure that everything is in the correct tense. Now, the 8th problem is small grammar and vocabulary mistakes. Now, if you're trying to get a band 7, band 8, and band 9, your grammar and your vocabulary is probably pretty good already. You shouldn't have too many problems. But the biggest problem is just making small, careless, or sometimes silly grammar mistakes because you're under pressure and you're under stress. And these grammar and vocabulary mistakes add up. And if you have too many of them, they can really lower your score. In order to get over a band 6, you should be aiming to have the majority of your sentences, more than 50% of your sentences, having no mistakes at all. So the solution to this is use the 100% rule. As I said to you before in module 3, if you don't know the meaning, the grammar, the spelling, the collocations, the synonyms, if you don't know everything 100% about a word or about a phrase, then you shouldn't use it. If you're 90% sure, you're like, I think I know most of it, then that's not 100%. Unless you know everything about what you're writing and you're 100% confident, then you shouldn't use this. Planning will help ensure that you're focused 100% on your grammar and your vocabulary when you're writing. If you effectively plan, then you don't have to think too much. during the writing stage. When you're writing, you can focus on the grammar, focus on the vocabulary, and good planning really reduces the amount of mistakes people make because they can focus on not making them. And finally, give yourself 3-4 minutes at the end, even if it's just 2 minutes, to check your writing, to proofread everything at the end. Everybody makes mistakes. I make mistakes every time I write a letter or every time I write an essay, and correcting these small mistakes can really improve your grammar and your vocabulary score. Now, the ninth problem is trying to use complex or complicated vocabulary. One of the biggest misconceptions and one of the probably the most frustrating thing for IELTS examiners and IELTS teachers is students thinking they have to use really complex and really complicated vocabulary. And what that means is they will make mistakes because they're not 100% sure about that word. What they do is they learn long lists of vocabulary and they insert these complex words into their essays. If you look at really good Band 8, Band 9 essays, they don't have many complex or complicated words in them. They have less common words, of course. They don't have very, very simple words, but they don't have really complex or complicated words. People don't talk like that. People don't write like that. If you read a good textbook, a good quality textbook in English, or you read a good letter in English, they're not full of really complex words. So the solution to this is have confidence in your vocabulary range. If you were able to buy this course, if you were able to read all of the stuff on IELTS Advantage and read all of the stuff and listen and understand everything in this course, then your vocabulary range is probably fine. So you should have confidence that the vocabulary that you have at the moment is fine. It is good enough to get the score that you need. Focus on accuracy. As I said before, don't use words that you're not sure about. It is far more important that you use words correctly than trying to use a wide range of complex words and getting 50% of them wrong. And the last problem is perfectionism. Perfectionism means that you're trying to write the perfect letter. So you're trying to think of the best idea, use the best grammar structures, use the best vocabulary, and write the perfect letter, as if there is just one letter that will get you a Band 8 or a Band 9. There is no such thing as the perfect answer. There are literally hundreds of letters that could get a Band 9 to any one specific question. There are hundreds of ideas you could use. There are many different combinations of grammar structures and vocabulary that you could use. There is no such thing as the perfect answer. What you should focus on is using the strategy that I've taught you, use the structure that I've taught you. Make sure that your grammar is accurate, that your vocabulary is accurate, that you've answered the question, and that is the best way to write your perfect answer. So let's just review what we did. We looked at the common problems that examiners see all the time and the main reasons why students don't get the band scores that they need, and we looked at very easy solutions to those problems. So if you focus on these problems and eliminate these problems from your writing by following the solutions, you have a far higher chance of getting the score you need. On the next module, we're going to get into the step-by-step guide to writing an informal letter. So I'm going to show you step-by-step how to write a letter to a friend, and we're going to use everything we've learned in the past 6 modules, so we're halfway through the course, to write an informal letter. Alright, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the second half of the course. Bye bye.